access the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, fellow Owens, welcome to the podcast of OA, episode number 238. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, and I'm joined by my good friend on the other end, Mr. Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, this is going to be a special one.
This is an awesome one. I'm glad we set this up. I'm glad we got everything put together, the conversations we had with the players involved, and it was fun getting everybody just to, this is the time we're going to do it. And I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, I know I'll probably never have this opportunity again. So I'm glad it worked out.
So this is a real special episode. We've done a lot of interviews in the past, and this one we're bringing together two ends of the Alan Scott legacy. So we are going to be joined by Spencer Nodell, the son of Martin Nodell, and Tim Sheridan, the writer of the Alan Scott Green Lantern miniseries. So we're going to have a four-person conversation talking about Alan Scott. We're talking about the history of comics and the future of comics. We're talking about the Pillsbury Doughboy. We're going everywhere in this one. This is a delight. We're recording this intro after we've had the conversation, but this was really special, I think.
It was, and a lot of people take for granted certain things, and I think a lot of what's lost in translation is the legacy of maintaining a character that you love and you create. Okay, so when it comes to a family oriented like the Nodells, and the creation of Green Lantern, Alan Scott back, early, the 30s, 40s, even earlier, you never can tell when it came to his fruition, but it's nice to see that we're still in 2024 and the family is keeping the legacy alive. His son Spencer, and then subsequently Spencer's grandson keeps the legacy alive with his website and stuff. I think is monumental, especially when it comes to comic book stuff.
Yep. So we're gonna skip the Green Lantern news, and we're gonna skip listener feedback and just jump into this conversation because it went on for a little more than an hour, and we don't want to make this episode too long. But I hope you enjoy it. I think this is a fantastic opportunity. I don't think we've ever had the situation where we've been able to capture a recording of a conversation between somebody tied to the character's creation that long ago and the current writer. I think is really special. So strap yourselves in, sit tight, enjoy this content, and we'll be back afterwards to wrap everything up.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, fellow Owens, welcome back to the podcast of OA. Phil and I have the enormous honor and privilege to welcome two guests to our show. One we've had on the show before, Spencer Nodell, the son of Green Lantern creator Martin Nodell. Spencer, welcome back. We're glad to see you and be able to talk to you again.
Oh, same.
Super. And we're also joined by the writer of the current Alan Scott Green Lantern story, the miniseries from DC Comics that's currently out on the stands, Tim Sheridan. Tim, welcome to the podcast of OA. We're glad to have you.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's my honor to be here, and it's my absolute honor to meet you, Mr. Nodell. This is really, really quite a treat for me.
Thank you.
It's a rare opportunity to get creators like this together, especially legacy creators,
I mean, well, and when you think about it, just because there hasn't been an Alan Scott title in 75 years, there hasn't been sort of a meeting of the people who are currently working on the book and the family of the people who created the book. Sure. I don't think there's ever been sort of anything like this, right? Is this an exclusive?
It is.
Podcast of OA?
It is. Well, certainly for us, I think it is for the comics fan community. I mean,
that's amazing.
There hasn't been this kind of collaboration that I know of. Spencer, we could be completely wrong.
Well, there's been like at San Diego, the Comic-Con, there would be panels and stuff where people would get together and talk about the golden age with with younger people, but I don't think there's been anything like this when a book's come out.
It's awesome. It's a great opportunity. We're halfway through the 6-issue miniseries. We're dropping this episode on the cusp of the release of the 4th issue, which Tim is teasing us with down in the corner there.
I'm just looking through it as we speak.
I'm waiting for the scans to be uploaded into my Dropbox. Come
on. Well, one of the things that's really interesting, Tim, about your story is you guys, and I know the Red Lantern character was brought on outside of your series, but you're really establishing how, I mean, the relationship between heroes and villains, the really iconic ones are when there's a personal connection. And in this situation, there's a very personal connection between the Red Lantern and the Green Lantern. We find out at the end of the last issue that the Red Lantern is Johnny Ladd, and that he, is it fair to say, Russian spy?
I mean, we can say that because the preview pages, the first 3 pages of issue 4 have already dropped. And yes, it's clear that, yes, he is Johnny Ladd is the moniker that he took, but his real name is Vladimir Sokov, and he is a Soviet spy and always was.
And that's really cool about, and we talked to Spencer about this. It's really cool about the time frame of your book. So the 50s are a hot box of McCarthyism politics, right? So a lot of the stuff was suppressed, and even Spencer was talking about some of the book burnings that took place up in Wisconsin back in the day during that time era, only because there was such a progressive rate of trying to regulate materials that were being produced for fear that they were directly associated to communism.
Well, you definitely, I wanted to bring this up because I watched your podcast talking about issues 1 through 3, and I thought maybe there was some confusion about the time period. This is actually set in 1941, right before the U.S. entered World War II.
Okay.
So, but what's great about, what I love about what you just said and what you said on the podcast is that the sensibilities that you're referencing about the 1950s and that way of life, those are such a part of, and are, the early version of that is such a part of this story. This story is very much influenced by that ideology. There was a terrific show that just aired on Showtime, and it was coming out the same time as our Alan Scott book was on shelves, which is called Fellow Travelers. It's based on a novel, and it starred Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. And it takes place about 10 years after the Alan Scott book in the 50s. And it's very much about the Lavender Scare and, two guys who are in love, maybe. I won't spoil the story, but trying to sort of negotiate that in a time when that is not something you can be and do openly. And so it's a terrific companion piece, it turned out, to the book, the story that we're telling. So while this story is just before the US and the JSA enter World War II, those sensibilities from that we're going to see, not only in the 50s, but then even up until today, are very much part of the story.
Well, I don't think it's really that important as to a timeline, because there's so many reoccurring features of stuff today in our modern political atmosphere. When people call people communists, and you scratch your head and go, "What? What's that about?
How long ago are you from?"
This is it's a time warp. And
talking about recurrences, Spencer, though, that's the great thing about, one of the things I wanted to do when Jeff Johns and I started talking about the Red Lantern character, that he was going to introduce in this story, one of the things we really hit on right away was, well, there needs to be a personal connection between them. And since this is a story about Alan Scott as a closeted gay man, then it needs we need to make that a romantic relationship because it tracks with Alan's history. Alan has had his most famous romantic relationships with villains. It seems to be sort of a trap that he falls into for some reason every time. He's certainly got a type. Let's just say that.
Well, yeah. Be it male or female, yeah, I guess
Right.
he's got it.
Yeah, that seems to be what can you point to, I mean, obviously there's Batman and Catwoman, but can we point to someone who has had, the multiple occurrences of this throughout I mean, Myron, Phil, I ask you, is there a character like Alan Scott who's had just, constantly getting into romantic relationships with the enemy? I don't know. I
can't think of any mainstream characters. Loosely, Jon Stewart. I mean, only because Fatality wasn't exactly a hero, and some of his other relationships that were kind of tumultuous.
I mean, Carol Ferris was Star Sapphire, but they had a relationship before she became Star Sapphire.
Well, yeah, and although technically Red Lantern, but we didn't know that he was a spy. But yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming as we go on, we're going to get more exposition as to how Johnny escaped the explosion of the green flame, or you're not calling it the green flame though in the story, correct?
The Emerald Flame.
The Emerald Flame. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So how he survives that?
He survived the Crimson Flame.
Yes.
But
yes.
then
Exactly.
The
Thank
Emerald
you.
Flame is with Alan. Yeah.
Yes.
You'll see that in issue 4. So that issue 4 is out. I think this drops when issue 4 is out, right? So yes, issue 4 is out now, and the first half of that book, of that story, is sort of Vladimir's story up until this point. And and we see some of the stuff we've already seen, but from Vladimir's perspective, and what was going on behind the scenes in the story as you were reading it. So that's all out now. So people are learning that. And then once we get past that, then we get back into the 1941 and the threat that is emerging for our heroes and our villains to deal with.
Now we know that this miniseries is scheduled for 6 issues. Has there been any conversation about anything coming next after that? I mean, we know Alan is in the Justice Society book, but is there any conversation going on about doing more with Alan as a solo character?
Not with me. The only I mean, we've had there were just sort of fanciful discussions, not even discussions, just sort of fanciful ideas between me and Andrew Marino, the editor on the book. Depending on the success of this miniseries, what that would mean and what it would mean for DC, and I think DC marketing, like they would decide sort of if they wanted to do more based on the reaction. Now, let me just say the reaction to this book has been, while there are some detractors who have a political, sort of message and a bias, and they can be awfully loud, they are nowhere near as loud as the chorus of people who've really embraced this book. And it's been incredible for all of us to see. There are detractors who want to keep saying this book has been a failure, and I'm here to tell you it hasn't been. It's been quite a great success for DC. So that's a great sign for the possibility of more Alan Scott in the future. I keep saying I would love, now Alan should have his own title, but I would love also for there to be a concurrent with the current JSA series, a concurrent 1940s JSA series. I just think there's more. Look at the Sandman book, look at the Jay Garrick book. I mean, there's so much, and there are so many more characters in that original Justice Society that deserve to get a look as well. And spoiler alert, we're going to be getting a look at them beginning in issue 5 of Alan Scott.
Well, that would be a good idea, because I'm sure DC or Warner Brothers is looking to use more of their characters for movies, just like Marvel, like Disney has really used their their lineup. And I would think that over the years, Warner Brothers or DC or whatever has neglected its characters to its own detriment. I mean, I sometimes I wonder about when I go to see a Marvel movie. I think, oh wow, yeah, another character, another something else to watch, and then Warner Brothers seems to have kind of dropped the ball. I mean, I don't think they'd admit that, but I don't know.
He brings up a good point too, because a lot of what I've found is people like nostalgia, and for DC to tap into a golden age kind of concept and bringing it forward into modern times. I mean, it's a gold mine, and it's a potential for everything. I mean, Alan Scott is popular by nature. I remember being introduced to him back when the Earth 2 title came out. Now, I knew about Alan Scott before that, but I remember really getting introduced to him when the Earth 2 book came out. And I was like, man, I really love this character. The artwork was great, the story arcs were great. So that made me go back and start reading more Alan Scott stuff. And of course, going back and reading Martin Nodell's, earlier stuff. But to bring him forward into modern times, everybody always gets confused with the whole Green Lantern and then the Green Lantern Alan Scott. 'Cause you got two different segments, and I remember when the Earth 2 book came out, and there was a big chorus of news, Green Lantern's gay, Green Lantern's gay. And then of course you had all my friends coming up to me, even my best friend, my best man, he's gay, Andrew, came up to me and said, "Oh, I heard your favorite character is gay." I was like, yeah. I go, "But did you know?" And then I went into the story of Alan Scott and then the differentiation between that and Green Lantern Corps and Green Lantern characters. And he's like, "I didn't need to know all that. That's just ridiculous." Walks away.
Well, you get a lot of license in comic books. I mean, you can start over. You had the death of Superman. You can start over. You can go backwards. It's not a thing that has to be current events. It's not it's not a news magazine. It's fantasy.
But we do get an opportunity to use the fantasy and the sci-fi and all of that stuff to tell stories about us. And for, I think I love comics that, are like great science fiction, like the original Star Trek series where, every episode, it seems fantastical and it's in space, but it's telling you something about your world today, right now. And that stuff is, and that's why I love, getting to tell a story about this character that is from an angle that we've never seen before, and is an angle we don't normally see with any characters in comics, and it's one that ought to be explored, because this is a hero who, whose secret identity has a secret identity, there is a lot of richness and there's a lot of storytelling potential in that. And so that's the kind of, it's not a historical document, right? It's not a history book, but but we do play a little bit.
I think too many people try to make it a historical document. It's just like Aesop. It's Aesop's fables. It's teaching life lessons. And a lot of times, like in some of the Stan Lee books from the 50s, the Marvel books, or Timely, as it was called.
Yeah.
He brought up moral points, and I think that's something that can be done, and I think you've done that. You've brought up, you know, a point that people can be what they want to be, and they don't have to be ashamed or
Right. There should be no constraints to it.
I think
be who you are.
Yeah, and well, yes, but also what I'm most interested in is telling. As a queer man and a queer writer, I want to tell our story. I want to tell my story. I think there's a lot of people. This book appeals to a lot of queer readers, and that was going to happen. But I think it's this isn't a book just for queer people to read. This is a book for everybody to read, because I think that it's important to read Alan's story, this part of Alan's story, because it's the story of your friends and your neighbors and your uncles, maybe your fathers and brothers. It is a real story. These are real experiences that people have, and we have to tell each other our stories. That's what this is. That's what this whole industry is based around. The concept of storytelling is that we all get better when we tell each other and we listen to each other's stories. And so there's pieces and parts of this story that I know a lot of people don't know. Just your average straight comic book reader in the Midwest may not know some things about the life of their queer friends, in another part of the country, another part of the world,
and then
and something about their story. And this is a place, comic books are a place where we can, nowadays, where we can explore and drop in some of that information and tell our story. Now, is that what the Golden Age comics were like? Is that what comics were like? When your dad was creating comics? Not really. They were fun stories for kids, right? It didn't throw down a lot of deep knowledge and information about exploring the human condition or anything like that. But but these stories have evolved, throughout time. And I mean, by the way, I don't mean that to be reductive. I just mean that comics had a different purpose, I think, in the Golden Age than they maybe do today.
Now. Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
during the Golden Age, a lot of it was affected by World War II, and there was a lot of morality in the early books with Green Lantern and Doiby Dickles fighting Nazis, and I think that would have been one of the things. My dad and the publisher and all the people at DC at the time would have gotten into, one, because they were predominantly Jewish, and also the fact that I think in some ways the government propaganda machine pushed them into it. I have a letter from that my dad had kept, thanking him and the publisher for doing work for war bonds, and it's from Secretary of the Treasury Morgenthau, and so they. They were into the war effort, and so I mean, comics can do a lot. It can do a lot of things, and this may be an aside from what we're talking about a little bit, but like when my parents were alive, okay, people would always ask my dad, well, because there would be talks about Green Lantern doing stuff, or the modern Green Lantern, all of them, there would be the fans would ask him, Marty, what do you think about what they're doing with Green Lantern? And he would kind of shrug and go, well, whatever they do, they do, you know. I'm not writing the books. So he was very accepting of whatever happened. And what's interesting, and this, you know, I know the guys are in St. Louis, but whenever my you know, and you would think someone who grew up in the 1930s and came of age in the 1940s would be kind of anti-gay or the anti-queer people or whatever.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and this has to do with St. Louis. When my parents would go to St. Louis, they would stay at the house of two gay gentlemen, and these were these were kind of one of their best friends when they would travel. They would visit with them and they'd have dinner with them. They would eat dinner at their house and they would stay over in their house in St. Louis. So, you know, like people kind of wonder about, oh yeah, creator from the 1940s. What would he think about, a depiction of his character in 2020s? And I don't, my dad would probably, knowing him, he'd be neutral. But, you know,
that's interesting. That's very interesting. You know, I mean, I've heard people say some things that are even more definitive than that. People who didn't know and didn't know your dad at all online have said things like, you know, Marty Nodell would absolutely hate what's going on with Alan Scott right now, as if they had any idea. But it sounds like you're saying no, he wouldn't have that kind of reaction.
I don't think he'd have a neutral thing because the biggest thing about Marty Nodell and my mother, Caroline, or Carrie, as she was known by the fans, was that they had they looked at everybody with equity. You know, they definitely were had all kinds of friends, and even when I was a child, and one of the gentlemen who worked in the Marvel bullpen with him was a gentleman named Fred Eng, and we would go to Chinese New Year with him and his family, and visit them in their apartment in Chinatown. So, you know, it's nice to see a heritage of where Green Lantern is not a hater. He's not a character that has an adverse political agenda or anything. I think that's the nice part to see.
That's amazing.
The comics medium has so much power. I mean, I've shared this story with Phil before on Mike, but for me personally, I grew up with a birth defect that affects everything I do, even 59 years later, and the Green Lantern character gave me inspiration when I had times when I was struggling with it. I've often said that Green Lantern saved my life, and Spencer, I've never shared that with you, but I mean, your father indirectly is responsible for that inspiration that I drew upon. And just to boil down a long story, my esophagus wasn't connected to my stomach when I was born; it was connected to my lungs, and so where it was reconnected, I have scar tissue, and I choke quite frequently when I eat. And as an adult, it's manageable, but as a kid, especially in a day and age when parents left you home alone to your own devices, I had a number of times when I would choke and nearly choke to death. And so I would have cases where I would be starting to lose consciousness because I was choking, and there was no 911 back in the 70s. And I would often be like, well, how would Green Lantern get out of this? It was all about willpower. That's what drew me to the character, because that's what I needed to get through any given day. And that's just how it impacts me. I'm just one person. It impacts people all over the world in so many different ways. I often use Green Lantern as a way to help people who are struggling with problems. And it's all about finding the light inside of yourself and the strength inside of yourself to overcome whatever adversity you have.
Well, I have two stories that relate to that. One story was with Harlan Ellison, and Harlan it said that one day when he was a youth, a troubled youth, and he picked up the copy of Green Lantern, and he got great inspiration from that. And so later in life, he thanked my dad, personally, for inspiring him to write. And another story is one time we were at a show in Orlando, Florida, and I was taking a break and walking around, and I saw Jamie Farr, Klinger from MASH.
Yeah.
And I went up to Jamie and I started talking to him, and he asked me, like, oh, what are you, doing at the show? And I said, well, my dad is Martin Nodell, creator of the Alan Scott original Green Lantern. And he said, oh my God. And he had a line of fans. And he says to the first fan, hold on a minute, I'll be back. He runs over to my dad's table and hugs my dad and goes, you are my youth.
That's awesome.
That's super cute.
He's had an effect. His book has had a great effect on people.
Well, I mean, the clear example is this 2024, and we're talking about it. So the character and the concept is still relevant today, like Tim was saying.
And the thing is that hopefully, Tim, you have a great effect on kids today, who might pick up the book.
That's why your dad is one of the main reasons why I am here living the life I'm living and doing what I'm doing for a career. I mean, I just don't think we would have the opportunity to tell the stories that we get to tell with this huge mythology from DC Comics or from any of the publishers without the imagination and the work of men like Marty and women like your mom. I mean, that's it's an entire look at how huge this industry is. When you look at all the pieces, look, Myron, Phil, like you have, a blog and a podcast that's based around, something that was dreamed up, 80 years ago or 100 years ago, that is still such a relevant, the longest continuous story that's ever been told is still being told, and we're still finding new things to tell about it. And those things came from the imagination and the pen of people like Martin Nodell. And I owe a great debt to him and to the others like him, because we're just standing on the shoulders of giants who created this for us. We talk about what is the world that our parents leave us, and what people like Martin Nodell left for people like me. He wasn't my dad, but look at what the life that I get to live because of what he left for me and for people like me and for my generation and the generation before me and the generations that'll come after, because I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon, regardless of the doomsayers of, comic books. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we're going to keep telling these stories because they started so perfect, so rich, maybe so innocent, but maybe that was the key. And it left us, this huge canvas to be able to work with. I'm going to be forever grateful.
Well, the artwork is great. I mean, it's when you look at all the covers of the 1940s that brought people in to actually read the books, and I know the cover of All America 16. Which is a great cover. And that was done by another at the time, a very young gentleman by the name of Sheldon Maldoff, who probably did 400 or 500 at least covers over his lifetime. But I mean, the legacy that these men have left is great. And I got to meet quite a few of them when I was younger, going to the shows and stuff. And I remember one time we were at a show, and I guess it was San Diego, and Jack Kirby was there, and it was towards the end of his life, and my parents, we walked over to say hello to him, and he really didn't say much. I mean, he wasn't feeling well, and they escorted him out from this dinner. But, just to be in the presence of these people, it was amazing. And I, and there's a lot of them who didn't get the recognition they probably deserved. And some of them didn't care. It's really funny. There were a lot of non-ego people, not with big egos, in the comic books field. Like I remember Jerry Robinson, who had a lot to do with Batman, and he was very it didn't inflate his ego over his lifetime at all. It was just, to him, it was just another job, really, and it was.
Can I ask you a question? I'm going to hijack this podcast because I have questions for you. I would, because the way you describe your dad, it leads me to think, and tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm on the right track here, but it leads me to think that he is one of the men that you're talking about, unassuming, not a lot of ego about what his contributions were. And it sounds like he's somebody who maybe didn't live with with an inflated ego and a sense that he had contributed something immense and great. Like, you're talking to three guys, right, who consider what your dad did in his lifetime and in his work to be monumental, and it changed all of our lives, and it will keep changing lives. Did he have a sense of that? Did he really understand that was the effect that he had?
No, not really at all, because he really didn't like doing comic books.
Oh man, I've never felt closer to Martin Nodell than right now.
didn't like doing them, and one of the other things is that this was probably a couple of years before he passed away, and he was talking to me, and he said, I think this was a question from a fan, actually, originally, was Marty, did you accomplish what you wanted to in life? And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, no, you know what? I didn't make as much money as I really wanted to make. And so I popped in and said, well, Dad, on the national evening news, you're going to be, when you pass away, they're going to mention you.
Yeah.
And he got he was like, I thought he was going to kill me that day. Like he was really angry. Pass away. I'm only 90 and I'm a young man. And, it's, but he got actually more satisfaction, and maybe, from doing advertising afterwards than he did from the comic books.
I have bad news. I hope your dad is somewhere looking down and watching this podcast right now. And I've got bad news for him though. The money didn't get better.
Well, it did for some people, but
for some people, sure, but
people,
not for everybody. Not in the Alan Scott world.
No. I'm sure it isn't. It isn't that much better.
What's interesting, Spencer? This is a tidbit that I don't think we've ever talked about before. But the artist, my partner on Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, currently in stores, is Cian Tormey. Cian is Irish by birth, and he's an amazing artist. If you've read the book, if you've looked at the pages, he's doing incredible work. But Cian came to comics. First of all, he grew up around comics, a lifelong fan. His dad was a huge comic book fan, but Cian's first work was in advertising. Cian was an ad man, and then he came to comics. And nobody's ever put that together. The connection that there is between your dad and the current artist of the Alan Scott book, that these are two guys who are known for comics and known for advertising. That's the world that they've lived in.
Well, many of the people in comics have either gone back and forth or done advertising or graphic design. It's that's where the money is. It's
now you tell me.
It's an advertising. Be a copywriter, and that that comes. It comes to me about the Pillsbury Doughboy, which some people attribute to my dad, and yes, he did the artwork for the commercials.
Okay, there it is.
But he did not create the character. And I know a lot of people who said, oh yeah, Martin Nodell, creator of the Pillsbury Doughboy. And
but it was his designs that they used, that they went with, right?
Well, not really. It was like he translated the designs of Rudy Purrs and Milt Schaefer. And these were the two guys that who were the creators of the Doughboy. The thing is that in advertising, unlike comic books, you don't get any credit for anything.
Well,
there's no, at least, like you have your name on a book. In advertising, you don't get your name in anything. So
I didn't expect to come on here and get into a fight with Spencer Nodell, but you will never, I'm sorry, sir, but you will probably never be able to convince me to stop saying that your dad created the Pillsbury Doughboy. I will continue beating that drum. I will continue beating that drum.
I just like to,
No, I think credit where it's due is important, obviously, right? But
right.
I would hate to give away all that credit and not reserve any for your dad, because I think that there's a reason why. I can't believe we're talking about the Pillsbury Doughboy, but we should, because we're talking about your dad. There is a reason why this right here is a cultural icon. Really, this is a cultural icon. This is something I grew up with. We all have grown up with, and people will still be growing up with. And there are many people. There are, what is success has many fathers, right? There are many people who are deserving of credit, but since we're here talking about your dad, by God, he's one of them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We're gonna have to rename the show the Pillsbury Podcast.
You know what? I will host that podcast. I'm launching that podcast. I love the Pillsbury Doughboy. All right.
But it's
that's the crossover we need, by the way. I want to see when Alan Scott created the Pillsbury, animated that lump of dough into the Pillsbury Doughboy with his magic power ring.
Is the 6th issue done yet? Because you need to hear the scene where Alan Scott creates a Pillsbury Doughboy construct.
Could have been your main villain.
Or go all Ghostbusters and make a giant Pillsbury Doughboy conjured by the Red Lantern that Alan Scott has to fight.
There's a thing that happens in issue 5 where we see a green energy beam traveling across the city, and I think there's room for a spin-off, a one shot, where we see that beam actually went through a pizza parlor and hit a slab of dough before it continued on its way in the rest of the book. And who knows what could have happened to that slab of dough. That's all.
This could be like a new version of Starro, only he's a giant Pillsbury Doughboy.
Oh,
well, you'd have to ask whoever owns Pillsbury now. I think.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know who it is now. General Mills, maybe. Yeah.
It's either General Mills or Kraft, one of the two. I don't know.
But or Disney at this point, honestly, it could be Disney. We don't know.
Well, they own pretty much. Yeah, Disney pretty much owns everything.
If it's not Disney, it will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was interesting when one time we were in Orlando and they were Disney was doing I think it was Mulan, and that was like their last actual full-length animation, which was done by hand before everything was computerized. And they had built this really nice facility in Orlando, in the park area, in the Disney park area, and but they had only produced one movie there, and they moved. I mean, they moved everything back to California, so they only produced Mulan there. But it was a very interesting experience to go in there and see all the artwork, tremendous amount of artwork hanging on every cubicle, every wall. And it was all how you were supposed to do the characters. And the studio was covered with this artwork. and I'm thinking, oh, I would just love to have some of that, just the practice sketches and all that. And, but eh, Disney contributed a lot to has contributed a lot to keeping the comic book alive. Really, I think, because of their Marvel. And the one thing about Disney is they have very deep pockets. So I think, in a way,
well, that's where I should be working. Okay, got it.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, or
I've worked for Disney quite a bit actually. They're fantastic.
Oh, you did, huh?
I actually worked at Marvel Studios for a year in 2022. The whole year it was actually a great experience. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they have pretty deep pockets, but
They do.
Yeah, I think they got lots of money, but it's I think the comic books are still here to stay. I think the demise of print is
I don't think it affected comic books the way they thought it was going to, because it pushed right through that. I mean, everybody thought, okay, well, digital is going to take over and print's going to go to waste. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, like Myron and myself, I still like collecting my physical copies, and I like having my stuff on my shelves behind me. I like having stuff shown. And I think maybe it had an impact on the industry, but I don't think it's.
I do think
Well-
it's difficult because I think that yes, there are a lot of people like you who want to collect that physical media, but the in the great scheme of things, I think that is I think that comics not transitioning fully to digital has been, my opinion on this, may be a hindrance. It may be holding it back. I know no people don't want to hear that, but it is. I don't think there is quite enough of a market of people who want to collect. I mean, we've seen the numbers. We've seen what constitutes a successful comic book run now, or an issues number of sales, a number of issues sold, is so vastly smaller than what it once was.
Right.
That I don't know if it's sustainable. I think that there is going to have to be a change. Something is going to have to happen. And the reason I think why we haven't seen comics just embrace digital is because it is absolutely, I think it's absolutely understandable to see why people would think that that would be a death knell for the local comic book shop.
Yeah.
And
it would.
I wouldn't, nobody wants to put local comic retailers out of business, especially not the big two. So it's a really tricky thing. It's a balance that they've tried to walk, a tightrope they've tried to walk. And I don't know how sustainable it is. I don't mean to sound like one of the doomsayers, but it is there's going to have to be some kind of radical change that happens. There's going to have to be something. Having said that, the stories aren't going to end. And the MCU is proof of that. The James Gunn's new DC universe is an example of that. They will still exist. These stories will get told. These characters will continue to be part of our lives. But comic books are we're on the ropes right now, and I think it's hopefully we're fine. One of the things about this book, this Alan Scott book, is, for me at least, it's an attempt to bring in another segment of the market to comics.
Mhm.
There are a lot of, first of all, again, the comic is for everybody. But if there are queer comic book or people who don't read comics, who are interested in comics but don't feel that they're represented in comics and don't see themselves in comics, hopefully they're seeing something in this book that is encouraging to them and that is interesting to them, and it's making them buy these comics. I hear from them all the time. People who say, I never bought a comic book in my life, but I've so far bought every issue of Alan Scott. And because I think a lot of times LGBTQ storytelling in comics can be very surface level and not exactly representative of our stories that are important and need to be told and retold. And so reaching out and finding places to reach out to deeper parts of the market that maybe we have not brought in and made feel welcome in comics is key, I think, to comics continuing in their physical form at the very least. So, this is one little corner of the universe. This is one little corner of the multiverse that I'm, working in, and hopefully bringing in some folks who wouldn't have picked up a comic book before, or maybe wouldn't have picked up a Green Lantern comic before. But there are lots of opportunities out there for that. There are so many people who don't pick up comic books every week.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can, it's a marketing exercise, but if we can talk to those people, find out their stories and what are the stories that they identify with and want to read and want to see represented in comics, I think that could be a good thing for the whole industry. But we'll see.
So I want to be mindful of everybody's time because we're past the hour mark. Tim, I know we've got the next 3 issues coming up. Is there something you want to say about the book to people who maybe haven't picked it up yet? What can you tease them with?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, if you haven't picked up the book yet, you should know this is a great opportunity to jump on to with a character in a huge important character in the history of DC, because it is designed as a jumping on point. We have gone back to the beginning. In fact, we've gone back a little bit before the origin in All American 16 that Martin Nodell gave us, just to sort of begin the story of Alan's journey. And then we've revisited the moments that we saw in his origins, his classic origin story as well. And so this is very much the beginning of his life and career that we're seeing. So it's a perfect jumping on point. Pick up the book. Even if you think Alan's story is not your story, even if you think that, well, I don't identify with this person, so why would I read this? Trust me, I am a kid who grew up reading about characters I didn't personally identify with all the time. There is always something that you can find that reminds you of you and your values when you read comics. Look for those things instead of paying attention to the differences. Look for the similarities, because that's exciting. And then you feel like you're part of the story, because you are. Because people like me try to bring you in.
It's what the story is. If it's exciting and interesting, and that I really don't care if a character, agrees with me 100%. It's
right.
And that's one of the problems today. People are just reading and going to the news that they agree with, and it's that paradigm. It's like people are not reading stuff that they don't agree with, and sometimes stuff that's painful is so important to get out there.
It is.
And that's, I think, one thing that actual physical comic books can do, because digital things that are digital, people can put on and shut off at any time they want. So if they see something painful, they can move on. It's like, and I think sometimes in the written word, you have to see it. It's there. It's in front of you. So
look, I'm always gonna. I'm like you. I'm always gonna say there is absolutely no harm in reading stories or watching stories that are about characters that you don't think you identify with, or that maybe you don't even agree with their ideology or what have you. But you may think that that's something to avoid. I'm here to tell you those are the stories you run to. And it's you're not in danger of having your mind changed. In fact, if anything, you might find that it actually cements your own belief system even further. But there's no harm, and there's only good to be had in reading stories that you think maybe you're not going to like. Because you might find that you do, and you might find that maybe you'll find you were right, but there was never any harm in it. Pick up a comic book. That's all I'm saying.
Sadly, I think we live in a time where people like to focus on what makes us different rather than what makes us the same, whether it's people or the media or what have you. And we all have more in common with each other than we have different from each other. And
That's
I,
right.
I think that's an important thing. And if everybody would just focus on what we have in common, yeah, we're going to disagree. There's going to be differences of opinion, but it doesn't mean we can't be friends. And we should be able to be friends, and we should be able to have rational conversations about our differences and find the common ground, because the only way we're going to succeed is if we all come together.
Well, and
I
we've always strived that on our podcast. You know, Myron and I have always pushed the fact that, you know, everybody has likes from different corners of this planet. You know, it's not me or my position to sit here and drive on your likes just because I don't like them. I don't care what somebody likes. I don't like Batman, but I can tell you right now, 90% of the population of this
we're
planet
going to
likes
fight about
Batman.
that later, by the
Right.
way. We're going to fight.
So it's become an ongoing joke with you know, with everybody in our podcasting, you know, that, you know, I just because I don't like them doesn't mean I don't rail on them all the time, and I'm not going to do that. But I still like you for who you are just because you like Batman. Is that okay? And I think that sometimes that messaging isn't clear because automatically people take it personal, right? Oh, you don't like Batman. You're a piece of you know what. No, 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 no. That's not the case. I just don't like Batman. I still like you. I just don't like your character that you like, you know? And we can have that difference and still have this bond between us, you know?
Let me tell you what I wanted to do, since maybe there's such a long answer to your question, Myron, but maybe let me tell you what I wanted to do with this book. Yes, did I want to tell you an authentic story from a perspective of a queer man who at a time in his life lived in the closet, and help you sort of understand a little bit about my story and the story of people like me? Did I want that? Yeah, that's a piece of the story. But more than anything, what I wanted to do was, since we hadn't had Alan Scott leading his own title in 75 years, I wanted to create and sort of help relaunch people's excitement and interest in a character that I love and that I know you love, and give them a reason to keep asking for more Alan Scott stories, and to keep celebrating the work of Martin Nodell and everyone who brought us these amazing Golden Age characters that are not lost to time. They're still here. But through the magic of comic books, we still get to enjoy stories and learn more about these characters that really started everything for us. That's really what we wanted to do, what I set out to do. It's meant to be a love letter, and it's meant to reignite people's excitement and interest in Golden Age characters, especially in Alan Scott. So I hope, for those who haven't picked up the book, that you'll find a copy, because they're hard to find for issues 1, 2, and 3 right now. But there'll be a collected edition coming out later this year. But pick it up, check it out. People are talking about it. That's worth a read, and learn a little bit about Alan Scott. We tried to be real faithful, even though there are new layers that we're adding into his story. And you guys picked up on this when you reviewed issues 1 through 3 in your podcast. But we very much we don't want to negate anything. We don't. We want to add more layers to it and give you some more dimensions to it. And thankfully, the Golden Age comics leave you a lot of room to add in a lot of layering to understand why Alan did what he did or said what he said. We had the opportunity now to go in and fill in and color in some of that stuff, and hopefully that's exciting for everyone. And that's the main goal.
So I do want to ask, speaking of fandom, is your husband a fan of what you do and the character, or is it like Myron's wife and my wife, or just one of those speaker pieces that just there and say, "Oh yes, honey, you can talk about it," and then a few minutes goes by, and then you're like, walk away.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about
I
my husband.
gotta know. I hear it. I want to
My
hear it.
husband is, first of all, he's a CPA,
Okay.
so he doesn't work in this business at all. But
Gotcha.
not only is he a, I think I can safely say, a big fan of everything I do and a huge supporter of me and my work. He's my sounding board. He is the guy who laughs at my dumb jokes and encourages me every single day. But also he's a lifelong comic book nerd who
Man, lucked out.
I'm sad a little bit to say is way more Marvel than DC.
Oh,
So we are a divided house in
love
many
it.
ways. He
I
is the
love it.
Marvel expert in this house, and I am the DC guy in this house. And so there, he was never happier than when I spent a year at Marvel Studios. He was so thrilled. But he loves DC too. But he's much more versed in Marvel. So yes, I am basically, my point is I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Go you, man. I love it. I love it.
Well, there are all kinds of fans. It's like um, when my dad had gotten ill and he was in the hospital here in Wisconsin, and a priest walked into his room. They usually have religious people come into patients' rooms, and he had an animated conversation with my dad, and my dad, who is not Catholic or anything, he said, "Oh yeah, that's the guy come back again. I really liked talking with him." So there's all kinds of people who enjoy comic books, and it's it's kind of a universal thing that if you asked 100 people, some would say, "Oh, I never read comic books when I was a kid, and they're silly." And then there's a whole group of people who go, "Yeah, I read comic books when I was a kid, but I don't anymore." So I think a lot of it is maybe getting adults more into into reading the books. And I think a book of this new Green Lantern character, the way Alan Scott is portrayed, could bring a lot more adults back into reading comic books.
Yeah, I'm just a guy who, look, I came from animation, and a lot of times in animation, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking animation is just for kids. And, I did a lot of adult animation, things that were, you could see some of it behind me here, that's really targeted for an older audience. And I've never been somebody who thinks that you, for lack of a better word, dumb it down for kids. I think that the stuff that we put out there for adults to consume and the stories they consume are also stories that kids could consume. When I was a kid, the stories and the things I read and the stuff I watched were written at a level well above what I could than what my world had allowed for me to really experience and understand at that. But I reached for it. I would reach for it, and I would learn about what were the references they were making that I didn't understand because I was a kid. And I always have maintained that that's how we grow, is when we reach for these things. And so I think that there's great comics are great for nowadays, especially for adults and adult fans. Absolutely. I think that, they're great for teens too. I think our book is that has a rating of like 13 and up. I think, everybody should pick up these books and read them. I think at that age you can understand the concepts that we're talking about and that we're dealing with, because we're dealing with very adult, and when I say adult, I mean deep, complex, corners of humanity and thinking. And in addition to fun superhero ideas and fights and costumes and capes. So they're for everybody. I hope that we can get more, like you say, Spencer, more adults who haven't picked up comic books to get in there and pick them up. And I think that hopefully we're getting the next generation of comic book readers in to read these books as well, to see that they're represented, to see that the stories are stories that they can identify with and can understand and feel happy that are out there in the world. I think that that's going to be key to keeping this business afloat and alive.
Yeah, I think things go in cycles too. I mean, like Disney, which is really smart. Every 7 years, they dig out Snow White and and all their old movies and just put them back up there because they figure that every 7 years there's a new generation.
Do you know what was great when Alan Scott #1 came out in October? The DC released the facsimile edition of All American 16 at the same time. It was on shelves, and I didn't know they were doing that. Nobody told me, and so I was delighted that it was out there because that was, for me, like the beauty of getting to write this story about, Alan so early in his life was there's a lot of stuff that we know about Alan Scott in continuity that happened later on, but getting to go back to basics and look at All American 16 and all the early stuff that your dad did with this character and just start from there and not worry about all of the other things that were going to come later. That was where we came from. That's how we approached this story. So I love that they put that book out there for fans today to reintroduce them to your dad's work and to the character. And then at the same time, they got to pick up this new story as well. I don't know if people picked up that facsimile edition. I hope they did. I encouraged everybody to do it.
I got a copy
because
yeah.
I think it's important to understand. I only got 6 issues and 20 pages each in 6 issues to tell the story that I'm telling. So I couldn't spend a lot of time revisiting the origin story. There it is. I couldn't spend a lot of time revisiting that. So I make reference to it. But if you read that book, it enriches your experience of reading our story, because it is grown directly out of it. That right there, that issue you just held up, Myron, that is the Bible by which, this Alan Scott series is based.
Awesome.
All right,
cool. Gentlemen. Well, I don't want to overextend our welcome, but I thank you so much for being here. Spencer, as always, we really appreciate your time and we are honored and privileged to have you be a part of our show. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. And I want to thank Tim for enlightening me as to what's going on. One of the things is that I really don't have communication with DC, and I have gotten some of the books from friends who've actually sent them to me. Oh. So I appreciate that. But
I'll send them to you. We'll we'll hook up. I'll send them to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Super.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
Can I just say, like, I think I started by saying this, but I have to close by saying it as well. What an incredible honor it is to not only be on this podcast, but to be here with you, Spencer, but also to just tell everybody how incredibly kind and warm you and your family have been. I'd never had any contact with you or your family until this book started coming out, and one of the friendships that are being made just from this experience is, for me, it's everything. I'm grateful to your family. I'm certainly grateful to your mom and dad, and what an honor it is to be able to talk with you.
Well, the person you spoke to is my grandson, who lives in St. Louis, and he's really into the whole thing, and I really enjoy watching him and take up the hobby and reading the books.
I'm going to get a little teary-eyed as I out him for saying this, but he speaks about comics and comic conventions. And when he talks about his involvement and his interest in it, he frames it as this is something I get to do with my granddad.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that that's comics for me. Comics are generational, and they bring us all together. They bring granddads and grandsons and fathers and sons and daughters together. And hopefully that's the way it'll always be. But what an example your family's
Well,
been.
also I have a daughter who does a website blog, Sequential Crush,
Mhm.
and it's all about romance comics, and she's really into that. And when I go to visit them, her and her husband have tons of comic books. I mean, here are well, I look at them as being kids, but these are adults who are in their late 30s, early 40s, and they're still reading comic books. And I kind of think, wow, this is great.
Hopefully they'll still be reading when I do my Green Lantern Pillsbury Doughboy origin. That's coming soon to a book near you.
Now I linked to the Nodell family website on the blog of OA, and I included it in the show notes. But if you haven't been to the Nodell family website, it's martin-nodell.com, and there are some great anecdotes and great photos out there. There's a nice little shop that has some prints of Martin Nodell's work.
Where you can get with this guy, right?
Exactly. And Tim, it's been a genuine pleasure to have you on the show. I hope maybe we can get together again before maybe the last issue comes out and talk again. To hype up the last issue would be great.
I'll come back every week. What are you talking about? I'm here.
I've got people that are probably listening to the show saying, the heck with Myron and Phil, let's have Spencer and Tim have a show together. The heck with those guys.
Let's take this show on the road, Spencer. What do you think?
To be fair, we have Sheridan's contact, so I can just keep busting out text messages to that dude all day long. I'm just gonna keep bothering him.
I sense a restraining order in your future. But Tim, it's been a genuine pleasure. Is there anything you want to say before we end up and wrap things up?
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate being able to speak with you. I mean, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. An incredible honor for me. Everybody pick up Alan Scott #4. It's out now. 5 and 6, wrapping up the story, coming out soon. And I'm going to be at Fan Expo Cleveland and Toronto Comic-Con before that. So if you're in those areas, come and say hi, get some books signed, and we'll talk about Alan Scott a little bit.
Well, if you ever come to Chicago and Milwaukee, let me know.
I hope I will. I got to talk to my managers and get them to send me.
Yeah, and hopefully, maybe my grandson keeps prodding me to get back to San Diego, but that's a project.
Yeah, but mostly because you and I will have to rehearse our tap dance number that we're going to put together,
or a comedy skit.
Because when we take this show on the road, we're going.
Sounds good.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
All right, fellow Owens, welcome back. Well, there you have it, man. That was a great Saturday morning cartoon conversation right there.
You're absolutely right. That was fantastic. We were talking off mic that we both kind of decided, hey, these two are having such a great organic conversation. We're just going to back off a little bit and let these guys have that conversation, because it was an opportunity for them to get to talk to each other, and it hadn't presented itself to either one of them before. So I was glad and excited to be able to facilitate some of that and help that come to fruition. But a fantastic conversation, great topics, and we locked in Tim Sheridan to come back again too. That was That was kind of my, we got to slide that in there, right?
I'm gonna be holding to it too. I'm gonna text him on the side. Like, look, man, you said this, you said every week. So, we're getting ready to record.
He might have to take over for me as the host of the show, co-host of the show. But we've got him, and we're going to be following up again with Jeremy Adams pretty soon, because when we talked with him, he said come back in 6 months, and it's been a little bit longer than that. So we need to get back with Jeremy Adams again too. So more content, more interviews coming up from the podcast of OA. Excited to have brought this to everybody. I hope you really enjoyed it, got something out of it. And we'll be back. We've got an issue of Green Lantern and an episode of an issue of Green Lantern War Journal to catch up on. So maybe what we'll do in the next episode, by the time we record, I'm not sure if the next issue of Green Lantern will be out or not, but we'll release this episode in time for Alan Scott Green Lantern number 4. And maybe we'll get together later this week, and record one on the most recent issues of the regular books.
That'd be cool.
We'll
I'd like to.
see.
I need to read the new War Journal. I haven't got it yet, or I haven't delved into it yet.
I just got mine yesterday, and I read it already, but I haven't done my usual reread deep dive thing. I haven't written reviews for either one of this month's books yet. I've been woefully behind. January has just taken the snot out of me completely, all of my energy. But so I've got a lot of writing and catching up to do. That's for sure. But we'll be back again very soon. I'm glad you enjoyed the interview. And again, if you haven't checked out the Martin Nodell website, please do. There's such great stuff there. There's some audio recordings of interviews with him, with Martin Nodell. There's an opportunity to get some prints of some of his artwork and support the family. I think it's just such a wonderful archive to keep those things collected in. And Spencer's grandson has done an amazing job of tying it all together. And so I kudos to him for keeping those things out there, because a lot of the creators of the Golden Age and early Silver Age kind of get left in the wayside. They don't get remembered, and it's really a shame, because they as Tim Sheridan said, they're the shoulders that everybody else is standing on.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So my friends, until next time, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. Thanks so much for watching this Green Lantern video from the blog of OA. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find even more great Green Lantern videos, reviews, podcasts, and more at our main website, www.blogofoa.com. So until next time, keep your power ring charged and make every day your brightest day.